Hey everybody, Brett from AstartesGaming here, back with another Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord developer blog video. We're going to be covering the last two developer blogs, the one from July 5th, 2018, and then the one from July 12th, 2018 that came out just a couple days ago. I'm going to lump them together because they cover a little bit of single player stuff that I think is interesting. So rather than skipping over them or anything, I felt like they were touching on, but maybe not quite enough for an episode each on their own. Anyways, let's go ahead and dive on in. So one of the main activities you carry out in Mount & Blade games is visiting towns. Towns serve as trade hubs and strongholds where you can socialize with the nobility, recruit companions, or get quests. That's even more true in Bannerlord. We do know that through recruiting now, you're not just saying, hey, give me troops. You're actually dealing with recruiters that you will have relationships with. We discussed that in, I believe it was the last video, but it's been a while. So there is actually a lot of relationships for you to manage, especially within these towns. So for Bannerlord, we spent a lot of effort on the town menus to make the experience as fun and immersive as possible. As a starting point, the town menu is no longer full screen. It now comes as an overlay on top of the campaign map. This hopefully makes visiting settlements a more fluid experience. It sounds like it would. So essentially what they mean, and I think it's kind of, yeah, they show it in the screenshot here. So you're never losing the overland map when you go into a town now. This is the overland map. Essentially when you visit a town, this will just pop in and you'll have the options that you had in Warband plus, whatever they've added. And you're also going to see like relevant characters up here. So it does seem like you'll be sort of dragged in and out of the game less by load screens and things like that, which is always great. And it just seems cleaner too. There was a lot of wasted space in the Warband UI, especially when you went to a town. It was just a couple of text options with like a background picture, but ultimately there was not a lot of stuff happening. So here you'll still be able to keep an eye on the overland map, but you'll have all the options you had before and then some. So I think that's pretty much a win-win. All right. So, also the basic campaign map user interface is still available, so if you would like to tinker with your party or inventory while visiting a town, you can easily do that. That's great, because if you wanted to do that in Warband, you had to go visit a place and then you could still press like I for inventory or P for party and bring those up, but you couldn't do it from the town screen. You actually had to be walking around in the town, or you would have to leave the town. So this is great. Now you'll be able to access that at any point rather than just those times. The menu background art was something that was really dear to us, and we didn't want to let it go completely, so we decided to use illustrations as the background for the smaller menu for town options. This required some retrofitting of the illustrations, but our illustrator, Serdar, did a fantastic job there. I mean, I do like the art in Warband, but obviously it was featured a little bit more prominently than it needed to be. The UI could have been, much more streamlined. So it seems like they're making a good compromise there. There are many things that you typically do in towns, so we tried to make as many actions as possible directly accessible from the menu, thus removing the need to load into a scene to perform actions. So yeah, that's sort of what we discussed above. The less loading you need to do, the better. Loads definitely take you out of the game, and so when you can just avoid that altogether, that's obviously preferable. So for example, prisoners can be sold to the ransom broker directly through the menu, and players can access the crafting screen without needing to navigate their way to the local blacksmith. The prisoner one is actually fantastic because having to go through like town to town and try to find a ransom broker in a tavern, especially when the taverns had multiple floors and you had to like run upstairs to see whether or not they were actually there. Very, very frustrating and time consuming, especially for someone like me who's trying to make like entertaining videos out of this stuff. Me running into a tavern, running upstairs, leaving, going to the next tavern, running, like that doesn't make for good videos. So it sounds like they're going to cut out a lot of the tedium, which is great because Warband is a very fun game, but there is a lot of grinding and tedium. And so if they could mitigate that and add more depth, obviously that would be quite the improvement. So one result of this was that the number of menu actions increased considerably, and it was no longer practical to access everything from a single menu layer. Fortunately, the solution came quite naturally. Town scenes have various areas and sub-locations, such as the tavern, castle, marketplace, etc. We decided to simply mirror that in the town menu structure. So the main menu now has options to go to various districts, which are themselves submenus. Each submenu has actions that are applicable there. For example, the arena submenu has an option to join a tournament. So yeah, that makes total sense. I like the way they did that. There are obviously other ways you could have organized it that would have worked as well, but this is, you know, it seems like a pretty good solution. So essentially what they mean is, like, here you would say, like, go to the tavern, and you'd click that, and you don't actually go into the tavern and walk around yet. It would just take you to the next page of this little sidebar menu, which would have the tavern options, and it could say, like, you know, recruit mercenaries, or sell prisoners, or, you know, whatever. But you wouldn't have to necessarily go into the tavern and walk around to do that. However, that option would almost certainly be there for you to do it if you preferred. So if you want the immersion of actually going in there and meeting the people face to face, you've got it. But if you just want to get in and get out, you've got that too. And obviously, the more options to accommodate different playstyles there are, the better. Okay, so where were we? Blah, blah, blah. I think we finished this. So locating and speaking to NPCs is also one of the most important things you do in towns. This can be done through the portraits on the top right panel, eliminating the need for players to enter the town scenes and search for any NPCs they wish to talk to. This may seem like a minor improvement, but in reality it has a huge positive impact throughout the game, as it helps to streamline certain actions to make them faster and less tedious, improving the overall user experience. So yeah, this is sort of what I mentioned earlier. All of the relevant characters are up here. So if there's a particular lord you're coming here to visit, rather than having to, like, you know, go to the castle and then ask for entry and then run around in the castle trying to figure out where that particular guy is in the castle scene, you just click on him up here and you'll enter a dialogue with him. And again, streamlining. It's something that, you know, again, will let people that just want to be in and out and take care of what they need to do that. But at the same time, you can still walk around in the castle. So if you prefer to actually, you know, be immersed and do that, well, you still have that option too. Okay, so players who wish to immerse themselves in the world will still be able to explore the scene. Yeah, what I just said. To locate notables. However, those who prefer to maximize what they can achieve during their play session will be able to use the town menu to perform any action and save some valuable time. So yeah, the immersion's still there for those who want it, but if you're trying to streamline or, you know, speed through things that don't interest you, that option is available. So that's the end of this blog. Let's jump on to the next one. This is a Q&A one, but this is, again, single player focused, so I felt like it was fairly interesting. We're going to skip through, we might read this, but we're going to, you know, skip his personal information. So anyways, Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord is a bit different from other sandbox games. There are some in which the story isn't linear, so you can more or less play in any order while you explore the world. In others, there's no such thing as a broad story that encompasses the whole game, or if there is, it's less important than the world itself and its inhabitants. You are free to roam and to discover them. Okay, what we intended to do with the original Mount & Blade, and what we are working hard to do even bigger and better in Bannerlord, is to create a game where you get to create your own story from scratch, where you make your own decisions and live through the consequences. Alright, so this guy's the campaign AI programmer. He's going to talk about campaign AI, obviously, and by extension, just the single player in general. So let's go ahead and skip down to... I don't really care what he does during his day. Let's just kind of speed through this. So he was trying to build the sandbox world, so probably not the map itself, but a lot of this stuff happening on it. Let's see. Wars, enemy and ally kingdoms, new armies will gather, caravans carrying goods, blah, 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 blah. Alright, so yeah, I don't think any of that is too important. Just kind of the stuff that you would expect. Nothing unique to Bannerlord anyways, stuff that you would have seen in Warband as well. So, what do you like most about Bannerlord? In Bannerlord, the power of a kingdom doesn't come just from its total manpower count, but also from the economic power of each clan within the faction. Through taking different actions, players and kingdoms can win wars just by restricting the income of their rivals. In Warband, this side of the game was quite weak when compared to Bannerlord because NPC lords never suffered from a shortage of funds. This is something I've been saying for a long time, so I'm glad that they're reinforcing it. Is that, you know, when I'm constantly raiding the enemy's villages and they don't seem to slow down their troop recruitments, it's a little bit frustrating, especially because they can absolutely cripple you as the player by doing that. So it's nice that this has kind of been balanced out. They can get hit just as hard as you can, and there's actually some strategy to these wars now. It's not just you hit my village, I hit your village, you take my castle, I take your castle. There's economics to the warfare now. So what's the most difficult thing that you've solved so far? The first rule for creating a realistic world for our games was to make NPC, Lord, and Kingdom armies make rational decisions. Yeah, so no longer having King Harlos calling a feast every 5 seconds. We had to ask ourselves questions such as, after one army has gathered and laid siege to a town, what should the besieged town's faction do in response? The answer may seem quite easy, especially if their army is patrolling in the area. However, what happens if the army is involved in an offensive siege of its own? Should they abandon their siege to head home and defend their own lands? When making these kinds of decisions, a lot of factors come into play: distance, army power, garrison size, blah, 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 blah. Ideally, the most logical decision should be found by the AI, and their army should do this. If parties give irrational decisions in critical moments like this, then players will notice this and start to interrogate our game world. Also, if players find situations in which the AI cannot react to or solve cleverly, then they could misuse it. So yeah, abusing dumb AI. For example, if raiding a village alerted all AI lords and most of them traveled to the village, then other parts of their kingdom would be exposed to attacks. Players would notice this, and the end result would be that they would be forced into using this strategy every time, which would negatively affect their gameplay. Yeah. So basically, you find the exploits and you exploit them. They're trying to create intelligent AI that can't be easily exploited. So what is he currently working on? I feel like, didn't you just ask, what did you ask before? What does he normally do? I mean, that's like the same question. Currently, I'm working on income and expense issues in Bannerlord. Clan wealth is mostly controlled by the clan leader, and all taxes are sent directly to them. However, the clan leader is also responsible for nearly all of the expenses issued too, except for some minor personal expenses like recruiting troops and purchasing food. Each clan member is expected to deal with these minor expenses themselves. However, clan leaders can choose to gift money to their clan members. There are actually a lot of additional mechanics surrounding clans, but it would be too much to explain right now. It'd be nice if you did, because clans is not something they've really addressed before. It's actually a word I don't think I've seen in any of these blog posts, but they're using it very heavily here. So I'm wondering what exactly they entail. We can sort of guess. They said they're within the factions, so they're not using this interchangeably with factions. Factions are bigger than clans. Clans are within the factions. My guess is that the clans are the various like families. So there would be you know, a prominent lord at the top, and then he would have like brothers and sons who would be in that clan, but they're all part of the same family and not necessarily as close to the other lords in the factions they are to each other. So they might have their own vested interest in things that might set them apart from other people in the faction, and maybe put them at odds with other people in the faction. But again, that's just a guess. So it would be definitely an interesting concept, because then you could have like inter-faction stuff, which was very, very minor in Warband. Like, it could happen. You could have lords kind of abandon their faction at very inopportune times for the faction, but ultimately there wasn't any real depth to it. It was just like a meter. When that meter got too low, they left. So this could actually create some actual tension, which would be a really nice addition, actually. So my main area of responsibility is the simulation of the game world. The game is quite huge in scale, and the simulation is open to many different kinds of bugs, many of which will only occur in certain combinations, if certain combinations happen. So half of my time is dedicated to fixing these bugs. I actually prefer bug fixing periods over implementing new things. Okay. Let's see. What faction is he like? I think Britannia is so characteristic when compared to other factions. Their architecture and equipment draw me closer to them. Also, their culture is more closely connected to wildlife, which I also like. Yeah, I mean, Britannia is a really interesting faction because it's one of the few in Bannerlord that's not really closely tied to a warband faction. And so I think that adds some sort of mystique to it. Also, we've seen their architecture, and their architecture is very cool. So that definitely plays a part. And they have sort of that underdog factor too, which is, I think, a draw for a lot of people. Alright, so morale in battles. Will there be a chance for a battle that does not end in a total bloodbath on either side? Yeah, that's something that Warband didn't do well, is essentially whoever won or lost, the loser always ended up taking like mass casualties. Now, depending on how close the battle was, the winner could take mass casualties, but you never had a situation where there was a clash and then the losing side routed significantly and, you know, their army remained intact, but they fled. Generally, they would sustain very heavy casualties, then they would flee, and by that time, you would just run them all down and they'd all be dead. So it'd be nice to see something play out a little bit more realistically, where you could lose a battle but still retain a good portion of your army, or maybe like strategically retreat without using exploits like I've done in some of my playthroughs. Anyway, party morale is a critical variable. It decreases massively if the leader does not pay wages regularly, or if the soldiers cannot find food to eat. Leaders have two main responsibilities: wages and food. Other than this, traveling long distances without entering a town makes soldiers tired and decreases their morale. Some strategies, like leaving soldiers behind to run away from strong parties, also make men unhappy. When you enter a battle with troops who have low morale, after taking some casualties, your men can lose their courage and start to flee. This means the battle can be lost even if most of your troops are still alive. These deserting troops go on to form a new deserted party on the campaign map, which the party leader can no longer control. Thankfully, there are a lot of different ways to keep party morale high. That's pretty punishing. So not only do your fleeing troops desert you in the battle, but they also desert you in the war. So they actually become your enemies, which is very, very punishing. Okay. So here we just get to see a battle screen. So if you came upon a battle, this is, I think, what you would see. Yeah, so if you walked up on a battle happening. And I like this breakdown a lot better than what we had before, where it was just like a huge list in generally odd-colored fonts that you couldn't read on the map of, you know, what was going on. And it never gave you a breakdown of like what lords were there. Whoever was at the top you could see, but then it was just a big pile of, or a big long list of units. So here we get a very clear breakdown of, okay, these three are on this side, these four are on this side. Here's, you know, how the battle stacks up. One thing that is missing from here, though, that Warband actually had, is that in Warband it would show you what units are on the battlefield. So I could, you know, run by and say, oh, that army is bigger, but it's all peasants. That other army is smaller, but it's all knights. And so obviously the smaller army would have the advantage despite the numbers disadvantage. So having that information somewhere would be great. Maybe over here, just knowing like, okay, you know, am I running into a bunch of farmers with pitchforks, or am I running into a bunch of mounted, you know, heavy cavalry? Because obviously 200 mounted heavy cavalry is a lot worse than 300, you know, farmers with pitchforks. But that's going to be the end of this blog and the end of our video. I think between these two, that's some pretty good information, stuff that I definitely, you know, wanted to hear. I really would like them to discuss this whole clan thing more, because I'm a bit intrigued. It's not really something that they've mentioned previously, and so I want to know what it is. I wouldn't be surprised if my guess was more or less on the mark, but, you know, without any information to back that up, I couldn't say for sure. So looking forward to hearing more about that. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I had a great time talking about some Bannerlord with you, as I always do, and I look forward to seeing you guys back here for the next video.